Another person savouring that renewed sense of freedom is the French Finance Minister, Bruno Le Maire. He shares these photos of his coffee break, which he captions "The Art of French Living." And he joins us now from Paris. Bruno Le Maire, very good to have you with us on the Al Jazeera News Hour. I do hope you enjoyed that morning coffee en terrasse this morning. It certainly would have boosted your caffeine levels, but also a boost to the French economy. How hopeful are you of a swift return to normality, a swift economic rebound in France?
First of all, I can confirm that I very much enjoyed this coffee this morning on the French terrace, because that's the French art de vivre, which was coming back, and we were all waiting for that. And I can tell you that everywhere in France, it has really a great importance, and we are all very happy with this reopening of the terrace. As far as the economic recovery is concerned, I'm deeply convinced that there will be a quick and strong economic recovery in France and everywhere in Europe. First of all, because we have been successful in implementing the economic recovery plan. You know that we have 100 billion euros on the table. We have already spent more than 30 billion euros, and the current figures and the current evidences are quite well. We are doing well as far as the French economy is concerned. Investment is well oriented, and I think that we should reach the level of 5% of growth in France in 2021. So I'm deeply confident that we are on the right track. We must confirm the current figures, and we are doing our best efforts to implement the French economic recovery plan as soon as possible.
Which will be welcome news to many of our viewers in France. Good to hear that your goals are on track to be achieved. It's not just France suffering, of course, Europe as well. And the AFP were reporting this morning that the EU's agreed to reopen its borders to fully vaccinated travellers. That will boost France's economy in terms of tourism and so forth. But it is quite a contentious issue. Can you confirm for us that borders within Europe will be open to vaccinated travellers, and how much of an impact will this have on your economy?
Well, you know, tourism plays a key role in the French economy. So that's why we have decided under certain rules to be open and to be as open as possible for the foreign tourists. We have decided to pay for the test, which is clearly a move in the right direction and an incentive to come to France, to have a tourist seasons which could be as good as possible. And we will define common European rules in a few weeks for the next summer. But once again, I want to insist on the fact that tourism is a key part of the French economy, and that's why we have decided to have this test for free for the foreign tourists, so that France will be one of the most attractive destinations among European countries.
Well, it's already a very attractive destination, Monsieur Le Maire, it has to be said. It's good to hear that the French and European recovery is set to continue at pace, but on the African continent, it's a much slower financial recovery that's expected. Now, France hosted the Summit on Financing African Economies yesterday. That's designed to cut that recovery time. What impact do you envisage this summit having?
Well, I just want to confirm what you are saying. We must all be aware on the risk of having a great divergence between the African economies on the one side and China, the United States, and Europe on the other side. Just have a look at the current figures. Developed countries have already spent more than 25% of their GDP to protect their economies and to have a quick and strong economic recovery. When you are looking at the African figures, it is less than 2%. which means that there is clearly a risk now of a great divergence after the shock between African countries and developed countries. And the risk is not only an economic one, it's a political one, it's a risk for stability in Africa, it's a risk as far as terrorism is concerned, it's a risk as far as illegal migration is concerned. So that's why we have decided with President Macron to organize this summit and to help the African economic recovery. First of all, through the issuance of $650 billion of new SDRs of the IMF. And among these $650 billion, $33 billion should go to African countries and to the less developed countries. And our goal with President Macron is to put more money, thanks to the G7, thanks to the G20, we hope to reach the level of $100 billion for African countries. And we really urge all G7 countries, all G20 countries to do their best efforts to put their SDRs on the table so that we can reach this level of $100 billion for a quick economic recovery in Africa.
Which is very important, but so far only France and Portugal have signed up to this. Are you slightly disappointed that there wasn't a bigger commitment from more developed economies when it comes to these proposals? Because I've read through your the communiqué after the summit, and there's an awful lot of work that needs to be done. And so far, France, Portugal, they're the only ones who've committed to setting aside some of their SDR commitments.
No, we are not disappointed, but we are fully committed to do more. We are not satisfied by what we have already reached. This is a first step. This is clearly a step in the right direction. And I think that we should praise the efforts made by France and made by President Macron to put this issue of African countries at the core of the international issues. We should praise the efforts and the results obtained by President Macron with those $33 billion for Africa, but clearly it's not enough. And we are fully determined with President Macron to do more and to stick to this path of support to African continent and to African countries. There will be a G7, there will be a G20 this summer, and we will not spare our efforts to convince our G7 and G20 countries to do more so that we can reach this $100 billion for Africa.
OK, you've been very generous with your time, Monsieur le Maire. I wonder if I could just ask you one quick final question. France, and I realise this is not part of your brief, but France is among those countries calling for a ceasefire in Gaza, but they're still facing fierce resistance from the United States. Given the enormous civilian death toll, given the fact that 63 children have been killed in Gaza alone, not to mention the attacks on journalists covering this conflict, our bureau was among the buildings destroyed in Israeli airstrikes. How frustrating is it that diplomacy is being blocked in a bid to end this conflict? And do you think France will force the US to veto any action at the Security Council when it comes to this conflict?
I think that President Macron has been very clear. Diplomacy cannot be blocked on this long-lasting conflict. There is a need for a ceasefire. There is a need for diplomatic action, and that's why President Macron has proposed this initiative with Egypt and with Jordan. I think these are very positive initiatives, and once again, I think that everywhere in the world, everybody is waiting for a ceasefire, is expecting a ceasefire. That's exactly the road that has been proposed by France and by President Macron.
OK, Bruno Le Maire, the French finance minister, joining us live from Paris. Thank you very much indeed for speaking to Al Jazeera.